Zenless Zone Zero is a masterpiece! But with 20 hours long of tutorial along with really time consuming board game as known as the TV mode, and will probably be the game that lasts for decades. My name is Realsuke. I've been playing Zenless Zone Zero for over 40 hours. I'm at level 36 Internet levels and finished the main story chapter 3. And I'm gonna give you a 360 review of Zenless Zone Zero. Playing Zenless Zone Zero is like watching one of the best drama you ever watch, but with insufferable amount of fillers, and eventually you stop watching it at some point, like The Walking Dead. The main plot, the main story in itself is amazing, but also they have been adding so many fillers season after season, so much so that the show dies over time. But in Zenless Zone Zero, instead of adding those fillers in the later game, they decide to front load it at the beginning of the game with the TV mode, which is being widely discussed about since last year, and yet they decide to keep every bit of it aside from double the speed, which is definitely not enough. Some people do find this most relaxing between the fight because the gameplay of Zenless Zone Zero is quite intensive and it needs a lot of awareness to fight the enemies. But it's definitely not right when you have to spend half of your time in the TV mode playing this board game in an action game, which I don't think this is what people expected from an combat action game. But don't get me wrong, I think the TV mode in itself is not bad. It comes with some pretty fun minigame, to be honest. I enjoy some of it. I think it works perfectly with the Hollow Zero mode. Probably much better than the simulated universe in the Honkai Star Rail. But when it comes to the story mode, they need to cut the TV mode by half for it to not interrupt the flow of the story and the flow of the game. I find my enjoyment to the game getting interrupted by TV mode for multiple times, and it is not just interruption, it also took a really long time to finish the puzzle. And of course, I'm not gonna go over which one is fun, which one is not, because I'm not the game developers. It is their job to figure out which mode is fun and which mode is boring. TV mode should be a side game, and it's not supposed to take majority of the time when you are playing it. It's just that simple. And it took me about 20 hours of playtime, which is in the middle of chapter 2, to find it getting fun. And there's no game should be played for over 20 hours to find the enjoyment. So it's totally fair for people to say that it's bad in the first 20 hours of their game. I know that I used to say stuff like you need about 20 to 30 hours to get used to the game to come up with something more objective. But there's a fundamental differences between taking time to adapt to the new game and getting cock-blocked by the minigames that you could have just played it on the browser. Yeah, I'm referring to the TV mode. I do totally understand from the business standpoint that why should you keep the player in the game as long as possible. Like one, if you invest more time in the game, the more likely you are going to stay in the game. And I think the way they did it in the Honkai Star Rail and the Genshin Impact are actually just fine with the unskippable dialogues that you have to click through it. It's like watching one of your favorite YouTuber insert with some brand deal in their videos, which is totally fine because monetization will usually incentivize YouTuber to make better content. And yeah, don't forget to drop me a like and subscribe so you guys can incentivize me to get out of my mom's basement. I'm crying for help. But when it went too far, like what Watcher did back in 2 months ago, they already used Patreon to monetize their channel on top of YouTube ad and sponsorship, which are all extremely lucrative. And they decide to fly even closer to the sun, taking monetization even further by setting up their own third-party website and paywall the contents there, and eventually lost 50,000 subs within 24 hours, which they totally deserve because people can smell their greed through the monitors. I think Zenless Zone Zero and the TV mode is a little bit like that, but not as far as what Watcher did back then. I think MiHoYo knew exactly what they're doing, they are totally aware of it, but they still decide to put the TV mode out there to see how players would react to it, which they have got their answer at this point. And it is horrendous. Even people who love the Zenless Zone Zero finds TV mode boring. They try to make the boring part of the game fun, to keep you in the game as long as possible without draining out by the combat, so that you are more likely to keep playing the game. But they took it too far. 100% they mess up the pacing of the game. They do address about this problem lightly before the release of the game. They are going to gravitate toward the content that use less TV mode, but more of an integration between combat and puzzle, which I experienced it in some of the combat side quests in the chapter 2, and I have a blast out of it. It was so fun. Jeez, I genuinely have more fun playing this mode than the story mode, than the TV mode. Man, I'm enjoying it. And I think the other reason is that they don't want player to reroll that much. And I think it's not a big issue for player to reroll their account, but it's a huge problem when there's people with nefarious intent to reroll the account and get all the currency and sell it. This is what they want to prevent. This is the part that people doesn't really talk about. But the way Zenless Zone Zero implemented is just testing too much of a patient. And I think it's totally fair for a player to drop a game within 20 hours if they don't find it fun. So that's why you saw a lot of content that's saying that this game is bad because it took too much time to get to the good part of the game. And the TV mode is not the only issue with the pacing. The other main issue that people are talking about is lack of challenge. I've been playing the game with the challenge mode all the way throughout the story, but I still find it too easy. Like there's so many instances that I was trying to get the combo right and the mob just died before I finished the combo. But however, I can still find the fun of the game from just trying to get the combo right, trying to dodge the enemy perfectly, try not to get hit by the enemy or just time the parrying right. And to get everything right in the fight is actually challenging, especially when the yellow flash came out. The timing is not that forgiving and it's actually very satisfying to get all of those right, and it rewards you with a really amazing cam work. If you don't find the game challenging, you're probably not challenging yourself enough, which is not your fault. All the fault lies on the HoYoverse for not doing the pacing good enough. And you shouldn't be facing the challenge after 20 hours into the game, while the game is actually great. I have to reiterate this. If you think the game is bad, it's not your fault. It's their fault. But if you are able to hold on that past 20 hours and find out that it is actually fun, then that's perfect, because it is. But I do think that the story mode is supposed to be easy. So anyone who came into the game could enjoy the story. And it's the whole purpose of the story mode. But if you want more challenging mode, there are always one right there. The Shiyu defense mode, the Horror Zero. I think those are pretty good and I had fun with it. And there's this instant where I messed up in the Horror Zero. I have two characters with really low HP. And my third character is like half HP. And that made the boss fight in the end of the Horror Zero mode became extremely challenging, because I would die in like 1 or 2 hits. It took me about 12 times to defeat the boss. And the whole progress is actually magical in this little happy accident. Oh my god, no, please die. But that also means Zenless Zone Zero failed as a game developer for us to find the fun by ourselves. So I think the real problems lies with people feel bored with the game before they face the challenge with the game. So I gotta say that Zenless Zone Zero is a really good game with the terrible pacing that could ruin the game. Now let's talk about the good part. The combat is exceptional. It reminds me the first time I played God of War when I was a kid, except that this happened every time you parry the enemy or you use the ultimate and it's on various kind of characters, and this camera angle is just so fire. I have never seen those kind of animation in the other game, but maybe that's because I didn't play enough game. Oh my god, the counter animation is so freaking cool. I have never seen any game with these levels of polishment. You can sense the collision between your characters and the enemy when their attacks collided on each other. You can feel the physics through the monitors. And I have never seen any game with these levels of interaction between the characters and the enemy that you're fighting with. It doesn't feel like one of those games you just kind of attack the enemy and numbers just pops up and that's your damage. They might shrunk a little bit and call that interactive. But in Zenless Zone Zero, you will feel the physics that you have never ever experienced in other game. At least for me. And it's just right up satisfied with those animation. The other aspect that I want to talk about the game is the design of the characters. I think the designs of the characters are amazing. They design in the way that redesigning the whole models, then just reusing the existing models and put on different kind of hair and clothing on top of that. It makes every characters look so distinctive. It reminds me the launch of Overwatch, that every character just looks straight up different. I was blown away by the levels of details that they have with the map design. Like in the 6th main street is obviously inspired by the Japanese residential area. And like the Lumina Square is obviously referenced from the China shopping center area. I think the story is actually pretty good. It doesn't have the strongest start, but in the end of chapter 1, it does have some dark twist, which I would like to not spoil it. I enjoy the interaction between the characters more than the plot, which is not anywhere bad. You're gonna feel that the interaction between the characters is not only just funny, but the reaction is also feel genuine due to the good writing and the characters building. And one point I want to point out is that I like the way they portray the story with the comics. It's much better than painting picture with the words like what Honkai Star Rail and Genshin did. I think the comics is a pretty good middle ground between yapping and the full-blown cutscenes. Speaking of cutscene, their cutscene is definitely a banger. You will definitely enjoy that. I think this is somehow indisputable. I do think that there's no other gacha game do the cutscene better than Zenless Zone Zero, as in the current state. And yeah, about the combat system, it is actually pretty balanced at this point. From what I learned from the CN side about the endgame, whether you are going for the anomaly build, critical value build, they all works just fine. And of course, the strongest team is the Ice team because that's the only team with the limited characters. They don't really feel that much of a power differences between these teams. Oh, and why do I think this game will last pretty long? I think if you take a look at the mission in the story mode, there is a timer in the challenge mode, which opens up a huge room for a speedrun community, providing the endgame content other than just Shiyu defense. You have to understand that there are people out there still compete the world record of the Mario, which is a 30 years old game. So you can kind of imagine that there would be this enthusiastic group of players who dedicate their gameplay into the speedrun and discuss about which movement, which pattern, which enemy, which characters do they have to use in order to clear the stage even faster by that split of seconds. Or even came out with like 4-star characters, 4-star W engine only run. And the variation goes on and on. I'm actually pretty excited with this endgame aspect of the game. So yeah, in conclusion, the game is great, but they mess up with the start of the game and the pacing of the game. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. See ya, guys.